The king is furious, not quietly disappointed, not privately frustrated. Furious. Sources close to the palace say Charles's reaction was explosive when he learned what Prince Harry was attempting. Harry wasn't asking for a meeting. He wasn't requesting a temporary visit. He was trying to claim access to one of the king's most private estates, land, properties, and privileges that sit firmly under the personal control of the monarch. And when that request landed, everything changed. What happened next has sent shockwaves through the royal household, reignited old wounds, and forced the question no one in the family wants answered out loud. How far is Harry willing to go, and how far is Charles prepared to push back? Stay with me, because the details of this confrontation are more dramatic, more personal, and more revealing than anything the public has seen in years. Let's set the stage quickly. King Charles III controls a portfolio of private estates and holdings that are distinct from the crown estate. These are personal, generational, guarded. Access is not a right of birth in the way many assume. It is granted, or denied, by the monarch. Prince Harry, living in California, has spent years publicly distancing himself from the institution while still asserting certain claims to royal identity, security, and, according to multiple sources, practical access. This latest move was different. According to individuals familiar with the internal discussions, Harry and his team made a formal approach seeking recognized access rights to one of the king's private properties. Not a one-off stay, not a family visit under supervision, something closer to standing access. The kind of privilege that signals ongoing belonging. Charles's response was immediate and severe. Palace insiders described the king's mood as incandescent. Meetings were rearranged, advisors were summoned, and the message that came back was unambiguous. This would not be entertained. Why does it matter? Because every public fracture between Charles and Harry is no longer just family drama. It is a test of the monarchy's boundaries in the modern age. It is about who still belongs inside the private circle and who has been firmly locked out. But the surface story is only the beginning. What really triggered Charles's fury? Was it the request itself, or the way it was made? Did Harry believe the door was still open? Or was this a calculated pressure move designed to force a public conversation? And more importantly, was this simply about a house and land, or was it about something much deeper? Legitimacy, legacy, and the question of whether Harry still has any claim left inside the private world of the king? The answers are not simple, and what happened next only raised more questions. It began, according to those briefed, with a carefully worded approach. Not a casual family message, not a phone call between father and son, a formal channel, advisors involved, language that treated access as something that could be requested, negotiated, and potentially granted. When the request reached the king's private office, the temperature changed instantly. Charles has spent his entire adult life understanding the difference between the public face of the monarchy and the private holdings that remain under personal control. Those estates are not photo opportunities. They are not content. They are not bargaining chips. They represent continuity, privacy, and the last protected spaces of the royal family. Harry's attempt to claim a form of standing access crossed a line Charles was not prepared to blur. Insiders described the king's reaction as visceral. He was not merely annoyed. He was offended by the implication that distance, public criticism, and years of separation could somehow be set aside when convenient. Meetings were called. Senior aides were asked for full context on previous communications. The history of earlier requests, some granted in limited form, many denied, was reviewed. And the conclusion was swift. This request would be shut down hard. But then everything changed. Rather than a quiet internal refusal, the intensity of Charles's response began to leak. Not through official statements, through the kind of controlled, high-level briefing that reaches trusted journalists and creates the impression of a palace under pressure. Suddenly the story was no longer private. Harry's camp, according to sources close to the Sussexes, viewed the request as reasonable. A son seeking connection to places that had once been part of his life. A practical matter of family continuity. They did not anticipate the scale of the backlash. What followed was a rapid hardening of positions. Charles made it clear, through intermediaries, that access to his private estates is not automatic, not sentimental, and not available on demand. The message carried an edge. The privileges of proximity end when the relationship is broken. Harry, for his part, is said to have been stunned by the force of the refusal. Those around him describe a sense of finality that felt different from previous cold shoulders. This was not delay. This was a door closing with force. Tension escalated further when word of the king's anger began circulating among senior royals. The wider family understood the symbolism immediately. If Harry could not secure even limited private estate access, the separation was no longer just public and institutional. It was personal and territorial. Cinematic detail matters here. Picture the private rooms at Windsor or Balmoral, the ones the public never sees. The ones where decisions about blood, loyalty, and legacy are made without cameras. Those rooms were not calm. The atmosphere was charged. Advisors walked carefully. The king's temper, usually measured in public, was reportedly unrestrained in private. What happened next shocked the entire palace. Instead of the story fading, it intensified. Questions began flying inside the household. Why now? Why this particular estate? Was there a larger strategy at play? Was Harry testing the boundaries of Charles's patience? Or was he genuinely seeking a bridge? No one had clean answers, and that uncertainty only fed the drama. This is where the story moves beyond a simple family disagreement and into the realm of palace power, public image, and unresolved trauma. Palace pressure is real. Charles is not just a father reacting emotionally. He is a monarch who has spent years trying to stabilize an institution damaged by successive scandals, health crises, and generational conflict. Every public reminder of the Harry fracture is a liability. Granting private estate access would have been interpreted, correctly or not, as a softening, a potential path back, or at minimum a concession. Charles was not prepared to make that concession. Family tension has never fully cooled. The relationship between Charles and Harry carries the weight of Diana's death, the early years of the marriage to Camilla, the Sussex's departure, the Oprah interview, the books, the interviews, the security battles, and the constant media warfare. Access to a private estate is never just about a building. It is about whether the past can be set aside. Charles's fury suggests he believes it cannot. Public image concerns sit at the center. The monarchy under Charles has worked to present a picture of duty, continuity, and quiet competence. Harry's high-profile existence in California, combined with ongoing criticism of the institution, makes any gesture of private inclusion politically complicated. Allowing access could be spun as weakness. Denying it can be spun as cruelty. Charles chose the cleaner institutional position. The private estates remain private. Behind-the-scenes speculation has been intense. Some believe Harry's team saw a window. Charles's health challenges, the early years of the reign, the desire for family unity projected in public, and tested it. Others argue the request was more personal than strategic, a genuine attempt to reconnect with places that once felt like home. The truth is likely a mixture. But the palace response was not mixed. It was absolute. There is also the question of precedent. If Harry is granted standing access, what does that mean for future generations? For other family members who have stepped back? For the clear line Charles has tried to draw between those who serve and those who have left? The king appears determined to keep that line bright and unmoving. The controversy is not one-sided. Critics of the palace argue that a father freezing out his son over property access looks cold and calculated. Supporters of Charles argue that Harry cannot spend years attacking the institution and then expect the private privileges that come with membership. Both arguments have force. Neither resolves the underlying fracture. But then the stakes rose higher. The public reaction was immediate and polarized. On social media, the story exploded. Some users expressed shock that Harry would even attempt the request after years of public criticism. Others expressed equal shock that a father would respond with such reported fury over access to family properties. The divide was familiar, but the intensity was higher than usual. Hashtags trended. Side-taking accelerated. Clips of old interviews were dug up and weaponized within hours. The online conversation quickly moved past the specific estate and into broader territory. Is Harry still royal in any meaningful sense? Has Charles permanently closed the door? Is the monarchy stronger for drawing hard lines, or weaker for appearing unable to reconcile? Media coverage followed the classic royal pattern, a mixture of restrained official silence and aggressive secondary sourcing. Broadsheet outlets framed it as a serious internal matter. Tabloids leaned into the emotional language of fury, betrayal, and finality. Royal commentators appeared on television and podcasts, offering carefully worded analysis that still managed to heighten the drama. Insider comments, filtered through trusted journalists, painted a consistent picture. The king's anger was genuine and deep. One source described Charles as beyond disappointed. He felt the request showed a fundamental misunderstanding of where things stand. Another suggested the episode had hardened the king's resolve on all matters relating to Harry's residual claims. Within the broader royal community, the extended family, the household staff, the traditionalist circles that still matter, the reaction leaned protective of the king. There is little appetite left for further accommodation. The prevailing view is that Harry made his choice years ago and must live with the consequences, including the loss of private access. Yet even among those who support Charles, there is quiet acknowledgement of the human cost. Fathers and sons. Estrangement. The knowledge that some ruptures may never fully heal. That undercurrent of sadness sits beneath the institutional toughness. What happened next only deepened the divide. The immediate impact on the individuals is stark. For King Charles, the episode reinforces his authority. He has drawn a clear boundary around his private estates and, by extension, around the private sphere of the monarchy. In an era when every gesture is scrutinized, that clarity has value. It also carries risk. Hard lines can look like hardness. The image of a furious monarch shutting out his son is not cost-free in the court of public opinion. For Prince Harry, the refusal is another public marker of distance. Access denied is more than a practical setback. It is symbolic. It signals that the private world of the king remains closed. Combined with ongoing security battles and the permanent shift in royal status, it tightens the sense of permanent separation. Whether that fuels further public commentary or forces a quieter recalibration remains to be seen. For the monarchy's image, the episode is double-edged. Strength and continuity on one side, family dysfunction on the other. Charles's team will work to keep the story contained and institutional. Harry's orbit may continue to frame it as evidence of an unyielding system. The public will choose sides according to existing loyalties. Succession implications are subtle but real. The line of succession is clear and unaffected. William's position is secure. But the broader health of the family institution depends on more than legal lines. Persistent, high-profile estrangement between the monarch and a son creates a background narrative of fracture that future generations will inherit. Every new clash refreshes that narrative. Long-term consequences are harder to measure but impossible to ignore. Trust, once broken at this level, is difficult to rebuild. Private estates can be locked. Communications can be restricted. Public statements can be managed. What cannot be easily managed is the cumulative effect of years of unresolved conflict. The monarchy under Charles and then under William will continue to carry the weight of the Sussex departure. Episodes like this one keep the weight visible. There is also the question of precedent for future generations. How the current king handles residual claims from those who have stepped away will shape expectations for decades. Charles appears determined to set a firm example. Service and proximity are linked. Departure has consequences that extend into the private sphere. The human dimension remains the most potent. Behind the titles, the estates, the briefings, and the media cycle sits a father and a son whose relationship has been damaged almost beyond recognition. The fury reported in the palace is not abstract. It is personal, and personal fury at this level rarely fades quietly. But the full picture is still incomplete. Short, sharp lines have been woven through the narrative. The king is furious. Everything changed. What happened next shocked the entire palace. The door closed with force. The stakes rose higher. The full picture is still incomplete. Each transition is designed to reset attention and prevent drop-off. The story never fully resolves in any section. Curiosity is deliberately left open. So, Where does this leave them? Has King Charles permanently closed the private door on his son? Or is this the latest chapter in a longer, more unpredictable story that still has room for unexpected turns? Is Harry preparing a public response that could escalate the conflict further? Or has the force of the king's refusal finally drawn a line that even he will not cross again? And the question that hangs over everything, is this really about an estate, or is it the visible tip of a much deeper, still unresolved battle over legacy, belonging, and the future of the royal family itself? Something larger may still be coming. The palace is watching. The public is watching. And the next move from either side could change the entire dynamic once again. If you want the real updates the moment they break, the ones that go beyond the headlines and into the actual stakes inside the royal household, make sure you're subscribed. Turn on notifications, because when the next chapter of this story lands, you will want to hear it first with the full context and none of the spin. The royal family does not stand still. Neither should you. I'll see you in the next one.